cult classic, action movies, shows, and the artists who helped make them. This is Action Gems. And welcome back to another episode of Action Gems. I'm your co-host Richie Watkins, and this week, Matt and I are excited to once again bring you Wyatt Weed. Last episode, Wyatt talked about his art department experiences on films such as Mission Impossible 2. This week, Wyatt delves specifically into the discipline that it takes to become a filmmaker. And later on, he tells you all about what it was like to work on Predator 2, wearing the Predator outfit, and being on that spaceship at the end of the movie. Here's Wyatt.
So, a question I wanted to ask that reflects your time in St. Louis, how it was what we were talking about earlier, which was storytelling, how a lot of kids, a lot of people our age and younger, they go through college and they learn all about the tech stuff and not the storytelling aspect. Like, so what's been some of the situations you've seen this come across, like in your own filming experiences, where people are so focused more on the tech stuff, they kind of miss the whole point of why we're doing this in the first place as filmmakers? Because for me, I've always been about I'm like the exact opposite. I have not been interested in the tech stuff. I've been so interested in stories, because that's why I love movies, is because I love the good guy, I love the bad guy, I love to see how the good guy triumphs the bad guy. And so that's what I've always been doing, sitting at a computer typing for hours and hours, and then, or just us coming with an improv thing. It could be the worst thing ever, but so I guess what's your experience, and how, like, I guess the bigger question being, like, how can someone who's never really thought in a creative storytelling way start thinking that way?
God, so many things come to mind. And I was suddenly reminded of, this isn't really quite exactly the answer to your question, but I was just thinking about the movie Jaws. And the movie Jaws was supposed to be about this shark doing all these crazy things, attacking this boat, except the shark didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what you ended up with was a very intense character study and drama of three men on a boat. And it becomes very much about the men and their characters and their interplay and what's going on with them, and so much less about the shark. And that happened because the shark didn't work. So they had all this time while they're waiting for the shark to get fixed to work on scenes, rehearse scenes, write scenes, sit in the boat at night and do the whole Indianapolis sinking scene and write it and rewrite it and redo it and re-perform it. So that film became so good and so effective because they couldn't rely on the special effects and the shark, and they had to rely on the characters and the story. Sort of semi-related to your question too is, I see so often, and I'm occasionally guilty of it, but I see so often, I want to come in and I want to do 45 shots today, and I had the funniest conversation with a young filmmaker. I was his first AD on a film. If he hears this interview, he's going to know exactly who he is. So he has a lot of talent, he has a lot of vision. He came in one day, and I think I said, how many shots do you have today? And he said, I have 45 shots. Oh. And I smiled, and I said, you're not going to get all your shots today. Well, don't think like that. Don't talk like that. I'm like, no. Just listen to me. You're not going to get 45 shots today. So my question to you is what do you need on your list? What do you need to get through the scene and tell the story at its essential basics? And he just kind of looked at me, and I think he was upset. He was offended. I think he felt like I wasn't supporting him. Like, why aren't you backing me up? And I'm like, I'm not backing you up because I've never had 45 setups in a day. I think my best days, I think I had one 28 setup day, and I had a 31 setup day. Spielberg gets 40 setups. He's been working with the same crew guys for like 40 years now, and he's Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg can get 40 setups in a day. You cannot get 45 setups in a day. Nobody can. It's not practical. So I told him, just, figure out what you need to tell the story. And that, I think, brings it all back to one of the toughest things about filmmaking, which maybe this is filmmaking 101. Everybody has stuff in their head.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to people, you pass somebody on the street and talk to them, everybody's got a story. I got a story about my dog, I got a story about my family, I got a story about my mother dying, I got a story about my divorce, I got a story about the time my car broke down in the middle of nowhere. Everyone you meet has a story to tell. The first question then is it an interesting enough story that everybody else wants to hear it too? Or can you make it interesting enough that everybody else wants to hear it too? So you have a story, and you're talking to this old man you meet at a gas station out in the middle of nowhere, and he's telling you his story. So you have the story in your head. You have to be able to visualize the story, and you have to be able to explain it to or get it to other people. That's like the number one thing. If you're a filmmaker working by yourself, if you're an animator, if you're a CGI guy, you can do it yourself and you don't have to tell anybody. If you're a live action filmmaker like we are,
mm-hmm.
you need more than yourself. You need a crew of people. You need multiple actors. They need to know what's in your head. So the first thing is to be able to see clearly in your head what it is you're trying to do, and then be able to express it. Now, whether that's storyboards or that's descriptions, sometimes you can express the shot in terms of energy. You can express it in terms of emotion. You can turn to your cinematographer and say, I want this to feel cold. I want this to be horrible. I want this to move lightning fast. You can turn to your stunt crew or your actors and you can say, guys, this has got to be intense. This has got to be life or death. You have to be able to tell the people you're working with what your vision is. So the first thing is to practice that technique of visualizing it and then getting it out to people, even if it's in the script.
Yeah.
Like, I've got something in my head, I know what I hear, I know what I see, I need to be able to put it on paper. And that just takes practice.
Mm-hmm.
That just takes a lot of practice. Two of the biggest problems I see are people get young filmmakers in particular, they get very locked up in their emotions and in their feelings. Now that's a good thing, because filmmaking is all about emotions, it's all about feelings. But it's not enough to have a tone in your head or have something that you're going for. You still have to be able to express it. So that's tough. I know a lot of young filmmakers, they admire David Fincher, they admire Christopher Nolan, they admire Quentin Tarantino. So they're trying to emulate the feeling. Well, it's not enough to have a bloody shootout or have a thought-provoking conversation. You have to be able to recreate the tone. So a lot of filmmakers get very locked up in what's going on in their heads and what they're thinking without bothering to figure out whether or not people watching it can understand
mm-hmm.
it. When I watch films and I don't get the point, sometimes I will ask the filmmaker, what were you intending here? Well, I was intending this, and I was intending that. And it's like, well, none of that came through in the film. And then they justify and explain to me, well, this reason and that reason. It's like, I don't care. I didn't see it. I didn't feel it. I know what you're talking about. I know what you're going for. But you have to be, the discipline in filmmaking comes in being willing to put your own ego and your own ideas in check and being able to shoot down your own ideas to be able to successfully tell the story. I just finished a video this week that I did for the city of St. Charles. It's a promo video for the city of St. Charles. My favorite shot, like one of the first shots I thought of, is not in the video because when the video got edited, it didn't contribute to the story. Now, I could have been a diva, I could have been a bratty cinematographer, I could have been precious and said, that's my favorite shot, that's the prettiest shot, I have to have that shot in there. But instead, as a filmmaker, I said, what's the sequence of shots, how's the best way to get this across? Okay, it doesn't include that shot.
Mm-hmm.
So my favorite shot went out the window. And if you don't have the ability, if you don't have the willingness to do those kinds of things, you're writing scenes, you're writing dialogue, you write the greatest dialogue scene you've ever written, you love it. And then you realize in the long run, it's superfluous to the script. It doesn't move the story forward. It's a great scene, it's funny dialogue, it's great dialogue. It's not moving the story forward, and your film is already over 2 hours long. The filmmaker cuts the scene. The filmmaker doesn't get precious about how brilliant this is and how special this is. The filmmaker throws it out. So not getting lost in your own head and in your own thoughts is a big thing. You really, a master filmmaker like Christopher Nolan or David Fincher, they can do things with color and tone and music and camera movement that creates a mood and creates a tone. If you're a first-time filmmaker, stop worrying about trying to emulate these filmmakers who you admire so much. Don't justify doing 50 takes of something because David Fincher does. I don't care what David Fincher does. You figure out how you make films. You figure out what works for you. And I admit it, when I started making films, I mimicked other filmmakers. I spent my first couple of years recreating scenes from Star Wars. It's what you do. You just have to be willing to listen to advice of more experienced people, put your ego in check, and move on. The other thing I see a lot is, and this is kind of related to what you're talking about, but good old-fashioned craftsmanship and good old-fashioned technique will save you every time. Even if you don't understand it, there's some basic techniques like working in cable television, even in cable television, let alone film school, working in cable television, we learned and got drilled into us master, two-shot, single, insert. That got drilled into us. And the reason it got drilled into us is if you don't know technique, if you don't know all these things, you can't adapt when things go wrong. So if you go into a day and you go, I want to do 45 setups, and you realize halfway through your rain-soaked, disastrous, mechanical failure-ridden day, you realize, I'm going to get 5 shots. This is a key scene in the film. I've got to have these two guys talk this out. It's the good guy and the bad guy. They've got to have a conversation. What am I going to do? I had 45 shots planned. Well, you do a master shot of the two people sitting there talking. Then you do a 2-shot of them sitting there talking. Then you do a single on one, you do a single on other, and then you do inserts of the stuff they're messing with at the table. Boom, you've got the scene. Now, is it what you envisioned? No. Is it as spectacular as what you wanted to do? No, but if you've seen a film like Heat, where you've got Robert De Niro and Al Pacino sitting at a table in a diner just talking to each other for 10 minutes, you realize sometimes that's all you need. So I know a lot of filmmakers who have never studied the basics of a scene and what, you can laugh at something like basic coverage, because that's what they talk about, basic coverage. You can laugh at basic coverage, you can make fun of it. You can be a cocky young Quentin Tarantino worshiper and laugh at basic coverage. But basic coverage will save your ass. And basic coverage is like learning how electricity works. It's like being an artist and learning color theory. I want to start out the gate and I want to paint like Picasso. That's great. You can paint like Picasso. But you should first learn about red, yellow, and green. You should learn about RGB. You should learn about that. You should learn about basic color theory. You should get a color wheel and figure out how to mix your colors to make other colors, and then paint like Picasso. So with filmmaking, I see a lot of kids, they don't learn the basics. They want to start out the gate and they want to be artsy. The other thing, oh my God, this is probably maybe even more important than the other things. Don't start out the gate making a feature film. Do not start out the gate making a feature film. I've known people who've done 1 or 2 short films and they're not successful. You can tell that they have talent. You can tell that they have raw ability. But they need experience. They need to make more films. And they say to me, what do you think I should do? And I say, I think you need to make like 10 or 20 more short films. And they freak out. They're like, 10 or 20 more short films? And I'm like, yes, 10 or 20 more short films. Make 2-minute films, make 5-minute films, make 20-minute films, make a comedy, make a drama, make a sci-fi, make one that's silent, make one that's set to music. Explore all these different techniques and do all these different things to build up your craft and learn these different things. There's nothing more sad than somebody who marshals all these resources to make a feature film the first time out, and then they waste the resources.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, you had great locations, you had good actors, your script was actually really good, but you didn't know how to make a film. So I tell people all the time, make short films. Just do little things. I have a friend who's a sculptor. He's a brilliant, brilliant sculptor. I said, how did you get to be so good? He said, I sculpted every day. You know, I talked earlier about I've got the old piece of shit race car, and I take it out and race it every day. That's why I can race.
Right.
This friend of mine, he's like, I sculpted every day. He said, sometimes I sat down at my desk for 15 minutes, and picked up a piece of clay, and he said, I sculpted one thing. He said, I'd sculpt a hand, I'd sculpt a face, I'd sculpt a foot, I'd sculpt a frog, I'd sculpt a monster. He said, I sculpted every single day. And that's how he got to be so darn good. Filmmaking is no different. I mean, they don't send surgeons into operating rooms to cut somebody open and do a heart transplant first time out. They assist on like 100 of those, and then maybe they get to hold this, and then maybe they get to use the retractor, and then maybe they get to use the suction. But yeah, you don't send somebody in to do something like that the first time. So with filmmakers, yeah, I understand, and it's tough when you're later in life. Like, you've been a homemaker your whole life, and now you're 50 years old, and your kids have left home, and you want to make a movie. Great. It still doesn't mean you don't learn the steps to doing it.
Right.
I've known people like lawyers and mothers and business people who are like, well, I've run a business my whole life, I think I can make a film. Two different disciplines. I wouldn't walk into a lawyer's office and pretend I could be a lawyer tomorrow because I've been a filmmaker. Don't now, because you're an adult and because you're smart and experienced, you should be able to learn the basics of filmmaking very quickly. It's not like you're trying to teach the basics of filmmaking to a 15-year-old kid. But yeah, I know a lot of people who are like, well, you know, I've been successful. One of the saddest things I ever heard, with all respect to women and all respect to mothers, is I once heard a mother say, well, I've had a husband for 40 years and I've put 3 kids into college. I think I can make a feature film. You know, you could probably make a feature film about being a parent and sending your kids off to school, but being a mother is awesome, but it has nothing to do with making films. So, you know, anyway, I'm not sure where we're at.
Well, that was...
That's my rant on filmmaking.
A couple things I wanted to bring up with that. So one thing that I've always said, and this has been a huge problem ever since the digital era, is most people just shoot as much as they can, and they just don't know. Yep, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so I think that's a lot of people's problem. I also think the other problem is, they're still young, but like it's not like learning math. Like you start learning math at the age of what, 5, 6?
Sure.
You don't learn how to make a film or how to start doing that stuff at 5 or 6 or whatnot. And so for a lot of people, they're starting at 18, 20. And so they're like, well, I'm eager because like I want to do it now. And it's like, no, you now have to, you are now a baby at this, which means you have to take the baby steps, which is, you know, learn to crawl, learn to walk, learn to ride a bike, then learn to drive, you know, and that's, I think, the 2 other problems that I've noticed a lot of. And that's a problem that I think a lot of people, including ourselves, with like, you know, shoot film or shoot digital like it's film. You know, that's a huge problem that we always do, is like, we're just like, well, let's just keep shooting.
I don't understand that mentality because it's still storage on a hard drive. It's still taking up storage space. And you still have to go through it. You still have to look through all of it.
Yeah.
If I shoot 3 takes and I was happy with the 3rd take, when I'm editing, I go right to the 3rd take. If I get in trouble and I need a different thing, maybe I'll go look at the 2 earlier takes. If I shot 3 takes on set and the 3rd take was my favorite, I don't even bother with the other 2. I go right to the 3rd one. I have had cameramen on set not cut the camera when I've called cut.
Oh my God.
For 30 seconds, a minute later, and the camera is still rolling, and I said cut. Well, I like to keep rolling because, sometimes little magic moments happen. You find me one film that has a great moment in it because somebody just kept rolling the camera.
That sounds like reality TV.
From the time that you call cut to the time that you call action again, the people are touching things up, they're not concentrating, they're doing this, they're doing that. If you're I absolutely 100% agree with you. I think shooting like there's film in the camera makes you focus. I talked about clarity of vision earlier. Figure out what's in your head, figure out how you want to express it to people, figure out what you're trying to do. The same thing goes with shooting multiple takes. What are you trying to do? I know people who go 20, 30 takes and they're trying to find something. They're looking for a quality. They're looking for some magic to happen and they don't know what it is. Again, if you've got the time and the budget and you can do that, if you're Stanley Kubrick and you can shoot for 18 months and do endless takes and retakes, brilliant. Do it. For me, I see the first shot isn't right. I go in, I say, here's what I need different. Yep. I see the second take, I make more adjustments, I fix them. I think if it's not wired in by about the 3rd take, I don't know what's going on. So...
and that's another thing is pre-planning. A lot of people in a lot of films nowadays don't pre-plan. And one of the biggest problems that I've seen on sets is usually when it comes to fight scenes is... They like either like my group. Usually, what we do is we rehearse for about a month or 2 prior to the actual fight, so we all know our movements, we all know our beats, but the problem has always been is the cinematographer is usually that side because they are never there on set or like rehearsing, and so when they get there, they don't know how to move the camera or it's just take after take after take, and it's like this ain't a dialogue scene. This is people almost hitting each other, actually hitting each other. You can't go as long as a dialogue scene, and it's stuff like that where people think you can just film forever. Who cares? It's like no. Like some of my favorite movies now, as I've gotten older, is like I really love the movie Ron by Akira Kurosawa.
Okay, sure.
And like. Most of that movie is just a wide shot. And it's just like, you don't need many shots to tell a great story. I mean, a good example is sitcoms still today do the 3-shot thing. You do like the media. And it's like, if you can find entertainment in that, then that's how you shoot your movie. Just
it's a better, more efficient way to shoot a TV show. I mean... That's the way to shoot a live TV show. They invented that about the time of I Love Lucy, and it's been working since. Find a new way to do that. With young people, another problem I think is everybody knows movies, everybody knows TV, everybody knows media. So even though you learn math at 5, but you don't learn movie making at 5. You're engrossed in films from a very young age. So even though you don't make films, everyone, including my grandmother, thinks they know movies because they all watch them.
Mm-hmm.
So they think they know what makes a good film and a bad film. Well, what you should do is everybody's got an opinion about film because everybody watches movies. So I think a lot of the people that you're talking about feel like, well, I've been watching movies my entire life. I know movies.
Yep.
Yeah, but you don't know what went into making them.
Mm-hmm.
You think you know movies because you've watched them, but making them and being on the other side of it is a very different thing. So again, you have to take your ego and put it aside and not be offended by this. And I'm sorry, let me gather that thought back up.
It's fine.
But it goes back to the thing of, you talked about people rushing it. you wouldn't rush any other field of expertise. You wouldn't, like I made the doctor reference, you don't rush into being a doctor. You don't rush into being a mechanic. You don't rush into being an electrical engineer. You need to go to law school for 7 years. Why would you rush into filmmaking?
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, it comes down to how important it is for you. The filmmakers that I know who are really serious about it, like a lot of professions, they never stop studying. They never stop reading articles. They never stop doing research. They never stop reading about cinematography, stories about directors. I'm fairly obsessive about the behind-the-scenes making of on a lot of films, particularly troubled productions. Like
Oh God, yeah.
That's what Richie and I like study all the time because we're always curious on what happened on this set
last night, and well, that's a lot of these episodes. That's the crux. That we want that to be the crux of some of the episodes. Just with certain people we talk to.
Yeah, but like yesterday we watched RoboCop 2, and that movie is nowhere near as good as the first one. And it's just like, well, what happened on set to have this? Well, of course, the lead actor who played RoboCop's like, well, this movie's nothing like the first one because it doesn't have 3 acts. And the writer and director are like, oh, sure, who cares? Giant robots fighting, it'll be great.
A giant robot fighting is great, but you have to care. So yeah, I think that the filmmakers, the children are separated from the adults in the filmmaking community by how hard you're willing to work at it. I know a lot of people who play at filmmaking, it's a hobby, and that's fine. I know a lot of weekend warriors who get involved in the 48-hour film projects.
Yeah.
They do fun projects to show in the local film festivals, but they have full-time gigs that are not related to the film industry. And that's cool. I'm fine with that. If you're serious about making a career as a filmmaker, you really need to be serious about the discipline, and the discipline is not racing right out and doing whatever you want because that's fun and that's the impulse that you're serving at the moment. That's not what makes you a good filmmaker. I've talked about Spielberg several times. Even Steven Spielberg didn't hit home runs right out the gate. The guy worked in television, and the guy developed his chops over a long period of time. And a lot of people who you think, are flash in the pan, overnight sensations, are people who toiled in the industry. I mentioned David Fincher earlier. Fincher was a visual effects technician at Industrial Light and Magic.
Yeah.
David Fincher was a special effects guy on Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
a lot of these filmmakers, toiled in the trenches, and like I talked about being in Los Angeles and seeing how things got done behind the scenes, that was the best education ever. When I was an extra on set, I was always close to the camera because I wanted to see how they were doing stuff. I was watching the setups. I was watching the prep. I was watching the lighting. I was watching the director talking to the actors. I'd just be quiet and sit as close to set as they'd let me so that I could be a fly on the wall and absorb all this stuff. All the other extras were over in the extras holding area, socializing with each other and talking smack about their acting careers and trying to get laid. I was as close to the camera as possible because... And you can get laid on a Hollywood set. I'm just saying. I wanted to be over. I worked on. Let me hit you upside the head for one.
Well, first of all, I'm just glad that this interview is going to answer the big question: can you get laid on a set?
Oh, absolutely.
That's actually why we started the whole show. I'm glad we found you.
I'm digressing seriously here now. My friends in Los Angeles were always complaining about meeting women. I go to bars, I go here, I go there, I never meet any women. How do you meet women? I'm like, dude, we work in Hollywood. Every set we're on set. We're on these films with 50 or 100 crew people, half of whom are women, and half of those women are young and single and attractive. My God, I'm an extra on a set with 500 other 20-something-year-old actors in Hollywood. How do you not meet women in Hollywood? But anyway, we could talk about personal habits and dating within the film industry. We could do a whole separate episode on that. So I was an extra once on a film called Postcards from the Edge.
Mm-hmm.
Postcards from the Edge was based on the Carrie Fisher book. So I spent a couple of days on set with, wait for it, Mike Nichols was directing, Meryl Streep was the lead, Carrie Fisher was on set to give script notes, and Gene Hackman was one of the supporting actors.
Okay.
I would have paid them to let me be on that set. And again, everybody else is off screwing around, trying to get a donut from the snack table. I was as close to Mike Nichols and the conversation as possible. I'm trying to think of the director of photography's name. The director of photography was some like Michael Bauhaus or some incredible classic, reputable filmmaker, cinematographer. But to sit on a set and watch Meryl Streep do like 14 takes of a scene and get better each time she did a take, that's, I would have skipped lunch that day. I would have just stayed as close to all that stuff as was humanly possible, to stay close to the action and see what was happening. That's another reason I think I was able to succeed, even though I never got to be a big Hollywood studio director. I was always the guy who was there ready to go, ready to jump on the opportunity. It's like if you want to make films, whether you want to act or write or do special effects or whatever it is you want to do, you don't do it by sitting on your butt over at the break station or hanging out at the craft service table or sitting out in the tent talking to the other extras. You get it by being on set, being ready to go, being prepared. I was always the extra who was standing there ready to go, so when they needed somebody on camera, they'd turn around and there I was. Boom, I'm on set. I was willing to stay longer. I was willing to come in after hours. I was willing to take on a tough project. I was always willing to be there and be available. I wanted to make myself indispensable.
Of course.
If I made myself indispensable, you had to have me. And so that led to a lot of work, and that led to, a lot of things. So, yeah.
Predator 2, you got to wear the suit. So,
yeah.
Clearly they thought you were indispensable to be able to get on set, and you were with the Lakers, I believe, as all the Predators.
Yeah. There was one other guy besides me, and I can't remember his name, and I apologize to your listeners in advance if any of this sounds politically incorrect, but the Lakers were all these tall, lanky black guys.
Yeah. Was Magic Johnson one of them?
No, he was not. He was not.
Dang it.
And it was none of them of any sort of a name or reputation that I specifically remember. So then there was me and one other white guy, and he was not a Laker, but I was the smallest guy there. It was me, and I'm like 6'1", and I wasn't as heavy then, but I'm 6'1" and over 200 pounds, and I'm in a Predator costume, so I'm in the big feet, I'm in the big head and everything, and I'm still the smallest guy there. So then it was the white guy whose name I can't remember, and then there was every Laker player who just went up in height, and then there was Kevin Peter Hall, who was like 7'2".
Yeah.
But you talk about indispensable. They say the old adage, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Well, yes and no. All things being equal, okay, if I've got two crazy guys over here who say they can do fight scenes, but I don't know them, and then I've got you two who I know, and you guys I know can do fight scenes, I'm going to go with you guys because I know you, I trust you. These guys are wild cards. I got a lot of stuff to do this day. I got a lot of stuff that has to happen. I'm going to pick the people that I know and trust. So it's not that these guys didn't know. It's just, all things being equal, I want to go with the thing that's going to stress me out least on set. So on Predator 2, there was a stuntman who worked on the first film named Brian Simpson. And what people don't realize is that when the Predator wasn't on camera with a human, it didn't have to be Kevin Peter Hall. So it wasn't Kevin Peter Hall jumping off of cliffs into the water. It wasn't Kevin Peter Hall standing there when something exploded. It wasn't Kevin Peter Hall jumping from tree limb to tree limb.
Uh-huh.
It was Brian Simpson in a suit that was scaled down to basically fit his size. And he and I were the same size. So as soon as the Predator ended up on screen with Arnold Schwarzenegger, it was Kevin Peter Hall. Same thing with Predator 2. It was various stuntmen in various scenes doing various things, but whenever the Predator, the city hunter, had to be on camera with a normal-sized human, it was Kevin Peter Hall. And Kevin Peter Hall did the majority of the scenes, but there's a lot of stunt work. I had worked with Brian Simpson after the first Predator film on this martial arts comedy called Kung Fu Rascals.
Kung Fu Rascals?
Kung Fu Rascals. That's a whole... Bring that... We'll have to just talk about... That'll have to be a whole separate conversation. But Brian and I worked together on Kung Fu Rascals, and on Kung Fu Rascals, I played a creature in a suit, and I had this big fat suit on with this full head of makeup and big teeth and everything.
Oh, awesome.
So Brian knew I could do suit work. He had seen me do suit work. So Brian and I were the same size. On Predator 2, Brian was set... They took one of his original Predator molds from the first film that was his size, and they redid it and resculpted it, and they made a new Predator called the Boar Predator, which would become known as the Boar Predator. Brian was supposed to be in the Boar Predator suit for that end scene. What then happened was he got tapped to go and supervise another second unit scene while they were filming that scene. So suddenly Brian couldn't be in his Predator suit, and they needed somebody to fill his Predator suit. Brian knew me, knew I could do it, trusted me. So like Monday night I got the call, and like Tuesday morning I was at 20th Century Fox getting in the suit. I mean, That's how fast it happened. And again, the whole, it's not who you know, it's not what you know, but who you know.
Yeah.
Well, again, there's probably a dozen guys who could have gotten in the Predator suit and done it, but because Brian knew me and trusted me and could depend on me, you know, when they said, is there a guy who can fill your suit? Boom, I was the first phone call he made because of that trust and that dependability. Yeah. So there was no great prep, there was no great rehearsal, there was no great casting process. It was like, dude, can you be at 20th Century Fox tomorrow morning and be a Predator? Well, yeah. Stupid question. Of course I can. So yeah, that's how I got to be the Predator. Have you guys ever heard of imposter syndrome?
No.
Imposter syndrome is the feeling that you don't deserve something, or you feel like you didn't do something, or you're not worthy of something.
Yeah.
It's weird to have done something for one day 30 years ago and still be going to conventions and signing autographs. So I went through a phase where I felt very guilty and weird about it, but then I realized, you know, the Predator is so important to so many people, and so many people are such huge fans. And I don't think I did anything special, but it was a privilege, and it was like a very rare kind of an honor. So I've learned to really embrace it. For a long time, I felt almost guilty, like, I'm an imposter. Who am I to be going to these conventions and making these appearances for something I did 30 years ago? Well, if you're a fan of it, it matters to you. I've had experience where fans have come up and they're so beside themselves. They're such huge fans of these movies, and it means so much to them to talk to somebody who was actually there. And if they can shake your hand and get an autograph, and they bring you an action figure, and can you sign this action figure? That's the world to them. And so I've gotten over the whole imposter syndrome thing. But yeah, it's a very real thing where you're like, should I really be here? Should I really be doing this? Should people really be paying me to do this? And the answer is yes. But, you know, it's not about because you're so great. It's just you're lucky to be along for the ride. You're lucky to have been part of something that takes on a life. So
yeah.
But so yeah, the Predator was a cool experience. It really was.
I mean, I guess I mean, you were on that Predator spaceship, so I mean, working in art direction, even at that time, that must have just been a haven for you, even just for that day.
Well, and the difference in times then and times now. I remember first walking on the set because they would get you as dressed up as you could, but they'd leave your head off until the last minute,
of course,
so that you didn't get too hot. So they'd walk you on set, and you pretty much had the full suit on, and the head would be standing by, and you each had a handler. So it was like 10 Predators and then a handler for each Predator. So it was like 20 people. The first time I walked on set, I saw that trophy case with all the heads in it, and the alien head from the Alien films was in the trophy case.
Yeah.
So I was one of the first fans who got to see, and I was like, oh, the aliens and the Predators are in the same universe. Difference between then and now, though, is there wasn't digital back then. There wasn't digital cameras. There wasn't an internet. There wasn't Twitter. There wasn't Instagram. So I went and told my friends, dude, there's an alien skull in the trophy case. It's so cool. But it's not like it could spread like wildfire. It's not like TMZ was going to report the following day that there was more than one Predator and that the aliens and the Predators are in the same universe. Nowadays, you could walk onto a set like that, snap a picture with your cell phone, and then it's at the speed of light. It's been sent out to 20 million people within seconds. Back then, I have photos of myself in my Predator costume. Other than Kevin Peter Hall, I'm probably the only performer who has his own photos of himself as a Predator. And that's because I snuck my 35mm camera onto the stage with me. And at one point during a lull in the shooting, I turned to my handler and I said, dude, can we get some photos? And he kind of looked around and he said, we're not supposed to, but let's go for it. So I've got this one great photo of me holding my head, standing there in my costume, and then I've got a photo of myself outside the stage doors in the full costume. Well, stop and think about that. What was I going to do? First of all, it was 35mm. I had to take it and go and develop it and print it. And then let's just say I wanted to do something about this and alert the world that there were multiple Predators in the new Predator film. How was I going to do that?
Yeah.
What, call Starlog magazine? Call Fangoria? And then what? I'd have to physically send them photos? And then back then there was like a 2 or 3 month lead time on publication. Nowadays, that stuff goes out into the universe instantaneously without any thought behind it. Back then, they might have been annoyed if they knew I had 35mm photos. They didn't care. But then it was, another 20 years went by before it even occurred to me to do anything with them. So, very, very different times back then. One day, I was walking through Hollywood Center Stage, maybe. I'm walking through Hollywood Center Stage, working on a job. There's some stage doors open. I walk by the stage doors. I look in. It's the carbon freeze chamber from The Empire Strikes Back with glowing lights and rising steam. And I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, what's going on? Is this new Star Wars movies? Are they shooting flashbacks? What is going on? And there's a stagehand standing there. And I said, oh my God, that's Empire Strikes Back. What's going on? And he just kind of smiled. He very quietly said, Energizer Bunny versus Darth Vader. Oh, holy cow. But again, here we go. Back then, it was like the stage doors were just rolled open and anybody who walked by and looked in could see. Nowadays, you couldn't do that. People wouldn't even be allowed on set with their damn cell phones now. It's just, it was a very different era in Hollywood. And the digital technology not only affected the filmmaking, but it very much affected how everything else was handled. But, bringing this back to Predator, that spaceship set, unbelievably cool, really, really crude though, because basically it was a huge framework with these cast pieces of fiberglass. It was just like big, huge chunks of fiberglass that had been pulled out of a mold. Mm-hmm. So the glowing, pulsing look was all lights on the outside of the set, and they were basically lighting through the fiberglass.
Oh.
So you were essentially inside of a giant fiberglass oven, being heated from the outside by banks and banks of lights, and then they filled it with smoke, and then you're wearing a Predator costume. So
God.
being a Predator was incredibly cool, but that set was 100 plus degrees and hotter, and when you were on set in your helmet, in your head, you had to like not overexert yourself, you had to be careful, you had to concentrate on breathing, because that set was really hot. The stage was fun. The set, though, was, when they had it smoked up and they had the lights going, it was really an oven in there, and it was really, really hot. None of us passed out. I got a little wobbly once or twice, but nobody passed out. But
That's good.
the set was incredibly cool, but it was not it was not the most efficient or temperature controlled set. So.
I had always wondered about that because it was one of the cooler sets I had seen, at least in those movies.
The whole thing kind of reminds me of sort of the Klingons from Star Trek, this very militaristic warrior-style race that still has technology, but the technology is all very heavy and baroque. And it's not designed to be comfortable, and it's not designed to look pretty. It's designed to just get you from point A to point B and help you fight. Yeah. So, yeah.
Do you have any other questions?
Honestly, that's probably good for today. And then, because obviously there's a lot more, I definitely want to talk about Kung Fu Rascals.
Kung Fu Rascals. The short version, do you want to talk about that now?
No.
We figure between that and Shadowland and
Batman.
and of course Batman.
Sure.
This will be an impromptu part 2 that we'll schedule soon.
Okay. Let me put this in the back of your head. We're going to have to try and find you a copy of Kung Fu Rascals somehow. Kung Fu Rascals was a film made by Steve Wang. And Steve Wang was a creature designer / filmmaker. Steve Wang was very instrumental in the first Predator film. And Steve Wang then went on to make some films. He made both Guyver films. He made an action film called Drive with Mark Dacascos. And he also did a Kamen Rider TV series that was on American television a few years back. But Steve Wang basically made this like $42,000 Super 8 Kung Fu comedy. And so he shot Super 8 film. We completely ADR'd it later after the fact. He transferred it all to video, and then he did the final edit on video. And it's insane. It's Kung Fu, it's wire work, it's monsters, it's giant war gods, it's just as lunatic as it sounds, and it's a tremendous amount of fun. It's very low tech, and again, it was a huge learning experience because working with Steve, Steve, who had like done all these big, huge Hollywood makeup effects films and was just such a great filmmaker himself. And he was an actor and he was a martial artist, and it was a huge learning experience. So I'm gonna have to see if I can track down like a digital copy of that.
Yeah. Kung Fu Rascals.
Kung Fu
Please
Rascals.
do.
Yeah. and we all played multiple parts in the film. Like one day you'd come in and be a ninja and get killed, and then from another angle you'd be another ninja and get killed, and then the following day you'd come in and be another character and get killed.
We just got an update that you can buy it for $85. Head Over Reels? I guess that's the place where
don't do that. Don't do that. We'll track you down a copy. You guys have a VHS player?
We do not.
No. My parents might have one.
We'll figure it. We'll get you guys a copy of Kung Fu Rascals.
Okay.
So, yeah. You guys will appreciate the just absolutely bare bones, low tech. Talk about low tech approach to filmmaking. But Steve, being like who had been on all these amazing sets, he knew how to do this. So he applied it all to this crazy martial arts comedy, and some of it's very cheesy and ridiculous, and some of it's incredible. Some of it is just amazing. You guys would appreciate the fighting. You guys would really appreciate the fighting.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch this because the name is already just ridiculous.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
I don't know. Yeah, maybe we could just make that our next action gem that we talk about. Dang,
Right.
Thank you. Yeah,
Sure.
but yeah, it was good catching up with you again, because I know it's been about a good year since we've seen you.
Yeah. I guess probably the last time was last spring.
Yeah, filming in the
No,
cathedral.
Spring. Yeah.
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 That day was cold.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a nippy night.
It was-
There's this guy, David Kirkman.
Yep.
Okay, and David Kirkman, he's doing a series of films based on the Marvel sub-characters Static and Icon.
Mm-hmm.
And he did Static. He's calling it the Dakota City Chronicles. So he did Static, and then he did Icon, and he's doing Static 2.
Mhm.
This is not for public consumption yet, but he had me do a cameo as Batman in Static 2.
Huh.
So there's a scene where Static is having a moment of doubt about what he's doing, and he's talking to Batman. He's like met Batman in a back alley, and he's asking advice, and Batman's sort of talking to him about what's involved in being a superhero. So I got to do this cameo bit as Batman for one night. And the new phrase is it cold or is it Batman cold? Because we shot that scene, I don't know, do you guys remember last Halloween and how freaking cold it got?
We weren't up there for Halloween.
It got
Or wait, no, I was up there for Halloween this past year.
freaking stupid cold on Halloween.
Like, it was threatening to snow. Yeah.
Yeah. So we shot on Halloween night,
Oh.
and of course, Batman's big and tough and muscular looking, but
Yeah.
I'm basically in a spandex suit outside in like 20-degree weather,
Oof.
and good God, I was cold when we finished shooting. So the new phrase is, how cold is it? Well, it's pretty cold. Is it cold or is it Batman cold? Oh, no, it's not Batman cold. So Batman cold is the new sort of gauge by which...
Super cold and have almost nothing on.
Basically, yeah.
Right.
If I did the scene in Dark Knight Returns where I'm standing on the staircase to the Batcave, and we shot that on a waterslide stairwell in December. I thought that was cold. That was nothing compared to last Halloween on David Kirkman's film. Yeah, when I first dropped my bathrobe on the bathrobe, when I first dropped my bathrobe on the stairwell, and I was standing there in my underwear, I immediately thought, "Oh dear God, what the hell was I thinking?" But the first time I walked on set in the Batman costume on David's film, I was like, "Oh, this is way worse. This is way worse." So, yeah, in between shots, they were wrapping us in blankets and putting us in front of the lights.
Yeah.
You know, when you stand in front of a big light and it's not even hot, you know how, like, sometimes you stand in front of a light and you're like, "Oh, I can't stand here, it's too hot." No, this was like, get as close to the light and get, yeah.
Basically hugging the light.
Oh, my God. Well, guys, this was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, want to do an episode 2, just let me know.
All right,
Absolutely.
we'll do.
Yeah.
All right. It was a lot of fun.
Yes,
Well-
it was.
Stay safe down there, and
So you stay safe up there.
Well, you know me, comic book shops and grocery stores are the only two things I'm doing.
Okay, very good.
Say hi to Gail for us, too.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right, guys.
Yeah.
I'm signing off.
All right.
Alright.
Take it easy, Wyatt.
See ya.
And you just listened to part 2 of our interview with Wyatt Weed. This was a very educational interview, so please share with us in the comments something that you learned from it. One thought I had from this interview was when he's talking about how you do have to take yourself out of the equation as a filmmaker after a certain point. And I think it's because even if it's your idea, if it's your story, if it's your film, ultimately there's a point where it's going to take on a life of its own. So sometimes there will be decisions that you want in there, but you have to always be thinking about, does this serve the story rather than you? Now, we have a part 3 with Wyatt Weed coming on a little bit later, but first we want to bring out some other interviews with some other people about some shows or movies that you may or may not be familiar with. So be on the lookout for that. Every Friday, it's Action Gems, where we find them and you watch them. See ya.